Wanuri Kahiu's 2018 film, Rafiki, is a work praised for its optimistic portrayal of queer life. This queer coming-of-age film follows the love story between Kenna and Ziki, two black lesbian teenagers living in Nairobi, Kenya. The two girls make a pact to be something real, hinting at Kenna's dream of becoming a nurse and having a fulfilled love life with Ziki, another woman. As the girls fall in love, the political rivalry between their fathers and the town's expectations for them as they transition into womanhood creates tension. Throughout the film, Kenna, who is more masculine presenting, is ridiculed for not embodying feminine ideals or presenting herself as desirable to men. This portrayal suggests the traditional gender expectations rooted in African culture. Living with her mother, an avid Christian and single mother, she is pressured to lean into her femininity and focus on her studies so she can fulfill becoming a nurse and obtaining a rich husband. Mama Atim, an older auntie in the community who loves to gossip, and her daughter, who is around Kenna and Ziki's age and displays jealousy towards Blackstar's desire for Kenna, are two women who are always seen watching Kenna and Ziki's every move. There's also this nameless homosexual male character who, although he does not speak and is mostly ignored by others in the film, is called slurs and is a constant reminder to Kenna of the consequences of being queer in their community. Although Kenna and Ziki's sexualities are exposed by the end of the film, and Ziki is forced to move overseas, the two continue to persevere and fight for their relationship, ultimately finding themselves back to each other in the end. Kenna's queer exploration and resilience with Ziki and becoming a doctor are symbols of her independence as a woman and stance against the African patriarchy, which critics view as a testament to queer uprising in Africa. Johnstone Lynn claims that the film's temporary ban upon release by the Kenya Film Classification Board, or KFCB, acts as a confirmation of the potential of the vital strategies of queer world-making at work in Rafiki. Rachel Milne focuses on Rafiki's vibrant aesthetics, which Kahiu calls Afro bubblegum, painting the lesbian love story joyously and overall positively. Samuel O. Odowu claims that it serves as a daring political and creative assertion that challenges the boundaries within post-colonial African societies, suggesting that Rafiki is part of a new, revolutionary era of African film. This overwhelming praise for Rafiki's acts of progressivism and empowerment to African lesbian folk neglects the inquiry into the treatment of African women who do not submit to men. At first glance, it may seem that Kenna and Ziki are discriminated against throughout the film for their queer identity. However, let's look a bit closer. The film critiques Kenyan culture by portraying the traditional gender ideal that women are commonly seen as providers for men and the greater society. I believe that through this portrayal, the film is suggesting that African culture is rooted in authoritarian colonial ideas, causing marginalized and silenced voices to remain unheard. I argue that the film critiques Kenyan culture not only through homophobia, but also through the portrayal of women being violently pressured to conform to oppressive gender roles, Christian values, femininity, and patriarchal expectations. This critiques the continent's standards of feminine representation and male submission enforced on women. So, let's talk about it. Rafiki's use of derogatory slurs and disapproval of homonormativity mitigates the film's supposed optimism. We first see this at the beginning of the film, when Kenna's male friends are seen antagonizing a noticeably homosexual male character. This scene, in theory, should make audiences cringe and think thoroughly about the messages the film is trying to send about Africa's view of homosexuality. However, due to bright colors of clothing and background figures, audiences sweep the portrayal of homophobia in the film under the rug of the light-hearted nature of Kenna's story. Rachel Milne claims that Rafiki's depiction of bleak prospects and queer relationships in Africa is in no comparison to the film's ending, which is a hopeful form of resistance against heteronormative social structures, overshadowing the film's negativity. The conversation reduces the acknowledgement of Africa's ongoing suppression of queerness, a deviation from traditional gender roles. Rafiki also portrays Christianity as a critique of Kenya's strict gender roles and queer rejection.
Mke wangu ni mrembo, shupavu, hodari, na pia mwenye busara.
In church, after the priest starts the sermon off by admiring his wife, the subtitles show that it is only women who rejoice at his high praise of another woman. Critics and scholars find the film to use Christianity solely to justify homophobia. For example, Samuel Odowu views these depictions of Christianity as a reason for Kenna and Ziki's societal criticism and physical punishment for being queer. However, this neglects that the film also depicts strict African gender roles through the use of religion. The film suggests that Christianity has not only driven characters' rebellion against queerness, but also the perception each gender has of the power over or under the other gender. Rafiki's emphasis on elements of heterosexual relationships also suggests messages about Africa's hierarchy of men over women. Mama Atim, as we know, who loves to gossip, congratulates Kenna's father when she finds out that he impregnated a woman who was not Kenna's mother. She hints at a suggestion that in Africa, men are praised for establishing dominance over women. Kenna's mother, in a way, lost access to her provider and is now suffering the emotional consequences because of it.
That easy?
You know everything about Izzy, don't you?
Don't make this about me, Mercy, eh?
It is always about you. You are the shopkeeper. You are the MCA. And what am I? A single mother alone who always gets blamed for everything. They will probably blame me for this, just like they blamed me when you left me.
Mercy.
The film is constantly sending messages that female characters experience issues due to male-centered expectations, which causes audiences to pay less attention to the film's critique of the structure of African hierarchy. Rafiki also suggests that women are physically punished by men when this hierarchy is disobeyed. However, women will also call out other women who fall out of the line with the African standard. Having to explore their love in unconventional and private ways, Kenna and Ziki find themselves engaging in sexual acts in the back of an abandoned van, removed from the rest of the town. Before this, however, we see Mama Atim's daughter following them to the van, acting out of jealousy and curiosity, proceeding to go with her mother to alert the rest of the town of the girls' acts. When they are caught in the act during one of their secret nights, people from the town come to force the women out of the van and publicly humiliate them by beating them and ripping the clothes off their bodies. At first glance, it may seem that this was just another extreme portrayal of homophobia at play. When looking closer, however, the people beating up the girls were all men. The men's reaction to Kenna and Ziki's relationship suggests that lesbianism in Africa is a threat to Kenyan men, as it serves as a refusal of male dominance. When Kenna's mother is informed of her daughter's queerness, she forces her to be exorcised in church. During the exorcism, the film purposefully depicts women praying over Kenna while the male priest stands over all of them. This is another suggestion of Africa's power structure and how males dominate women in African society. Some critics may argue that Rafiki is inherently optimistic and that violence in African films should not invalidate the overpowering, joyful moments of Rafiki's presentation. However, Rafiki's audience is very impressionable, as queer adolescents in Africa look to the film for a source of solace and hope. Lynn Johnstone recognizes that when Nuri Kahiu intended to foster community with Rafiki, making the film featured in a utopic space for queer individuals in Kenya to watch the film and feel safe around others in the queer Kenyan community. However, this focus on the environment and connection with queer community made audiences neglect the severity of the actions done in the film, and the need for increased awareness in Kenya for both queer communities and marginalized women. Audiences collaboratively analyzing the abuse and violence depicted against queer individuals and women during viewings of Rafiki help audiences obtain a better understanding of what Rafiki suggests is a realistic queer life in Kenya, which is that it is not as optimistic and linear as scholars suggest. Reflecting on and analyzing Rafiki, scholars' praise of Kenna and Ziki's overcoming of trials and tribulations overshadows the film's negative, harsh moments, neglecting the film's suggestions of misogyny in Africa. Sure, vibrant aesthetics, a hopeful narrative, and utopic viewing spaces can bring audiences joy when viewing Kenna and Ziki's story, but without recognition that the film is also a critique of gender roles, sexism, and African patriarchy, audiences who seek deeper insight into the narrative of the film risk being led astray by the oversimplification of the current scholarly conversation. The film can be seen as a sign of a new wave of queer representation in African film and media. Having queer characters at the forefront of the film depicted in a realistic manner helps queer adolescents and general audiences in Africa have a more realistic perspective of how queer individuals are treated in their respective communities. This new understanding and queer representation can open doors to revolutionary forms of awareness and push back against queer and gender marginalization in African society.